Imagine being an engineer, starting a business in the guest room of your house only to have it grow quickly to 60 people and rapidly expanding. Well, my guest in today's Civil Engineering CEO show, Mike Nunley, did just that. And one of the things that Mike talks about in this episode is he said that he spends 99% of his time managing this one thing. Wait till you see what it is. We're going to jump right in with Mike, but first, a word from our sponsor. Before we go on here, I'd like to recognize our sponsor for this episode, Tensar International.
Check out Tensar Plus, the award-winning design software for construction professionals to design with geosynthetics and calculate their value on projects. Tensar Plus is simple to use with a powerful engineering system at its core. Whether you're designing a crane pad or need to build a temporary road over muck, the cost, time, and carbon savings can be calculated, making comparison with alternatives simple. Whatever you're working on, Tensar Plus is your toolbox for success.
All right, now I'd like to welcome my guest onto the show for today. Mike Nunley is the CEO and president of MKN. Mike, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it.
So, Mike, to get us going here, tell us a little bit about your career to date and how you got to where you are today as a CEO.
Sure, thanks. So, grew up in Virginia, graduated from Virginia Tech in '95 in civil engineering. Worked for 4 years on the East Coast. Got my wife through grad school. Then we moved to California in '98. Or '99. She did the same thing for me. So she worked me through grad school at Cal, and I got my master's in environmental engineering. And then I moved to San Luis Obispo County, which is midway between Los Angeles and San Francisco, and a little bit north of Santa Barbara, if you're familiar with that area. Worked with a consulting firm there for a couple of years doing private development. Most of my experience before that had been in the public sector as a consulting engineer, but working primarily for public agencies. So worked for a couple of years with a private development focused firm, moved on to a company called Boyle Engineering, and it was a water, wastewater, and transportation firm focused in public markets. It was acquired by AECOM around 2008, and I became the wastewater market sector leader for them for the West Coast. So steadily kind of worked my way up through the ranks at Boyle and AECOM. And then there were layoffs in May of 2012. And so a number of us were released. It was right at the tail end of kind of the economic downturn, and it hit some of the firms focused more on the public side a little bit later, and was a bit in a panic, wasn't sure what to do. Didn't really have a plan B, and I had a fourth child on the way, so I had 3 daughters, and decided I needed to stay in San Luis Obispo County because that's where my in-laws were, and so started MKN. And MKN is my initials, so it's Michael Kelly Nunley. And when I started the company, the funny thing was I worked with an attorney, and out of the gate, my goal was just do a little consulting work, basically to feed myself. Bought had a little severance package. So I bought a copy of AutoCAD, started doing my own drafting again, bought a folding table at Costco, shoved a bed against the wall in the guest room. And the first year was just me banging out plans and specs and writing reports, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. But started to see that there actually could be the potential for a real business out of it. And there were not a lot of engineering firms that are kind of focused on the public agencies that were smaller engineering firms that kind of had a more personal touch than the national firms. There was a great, an amazing array of talent when you get to kind of the national firm level, and the there's definitely a place in a time for those agencies, but that's not every project. And so after the first year of operating on my own, opened the office here in Arroyo Grande, brought some staff over that I used to work with, friends and colleagues, and then over time we built that to a network of 9 offices. So
Mike, before you go further, because that's a big jump there from your guest room to 9 offices.
No problem.
Let me just say this. You mentioned before, you said at one point you kind of knew it could be a real business, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that like? What was it that did that for you? What helped you to recognize that?
So right after I got released, the first thing I did was reach out to some clients that I had worked with, but they missed working with a smaller firm with a more personal touch. And what I found was it was really easy to get projects. And there was a lot of work out there. The agencies felt like they were being underserved in a lot of ways, and that's not a slam on the big firms. It's just the big companies can do a certain range of project and make money on them, and that's their business model. And everything kind of beneath that level was fair game.
Right.
And I found that the agencies really wanted a more personal touch. They wanted a firm they could really partner with, and I saw that I could offer that. Also, there were so many acquisitions and mergers in the consulting business that a lot of these agencies had lost access to the engineers that they used to work with, and found that there was a great business. There was just a need for a firm that kind of had a more personal touch. And I would say, even though we consider ourselves a smaller firm, I had a resume that punched way above my weight, as did the people I brought on board. And so we had resumes that could stack up against some of the best resumes at the national firms, but we could offer a presence that was within a couple of hours of their location. Mm-hmm. And what we started to see in working with and reaching out to former colleagues that I'd had was they wanted to control their own destiny. And so kind of on both sides of the equation, both in terms of them offering services and there being a need for services out there, I just saw tremendous opportunity to start bringing on folks to be partners in the business and to also partner with the clients. And so we started with Arroyo Grande, added a Bakersfield presence, brought a really strong principal water treatment engineer on board in Bakersfield with over 30 years experience. He'd worked on some of the most sophisticated desalination projects in the country. And so we were lucky to have him right out of the gate, built our treatment practice, and really that we're off to the races. So we added Fresno soon after, and over time we've added, not necessarily in chronological order, but we've added Ventura, Irvine, Santa Clarita, Oceanside, San Jose, and most recently too, an office in downtown San Luis Obispo, where we could be a little closer to some of our clients there, and also be closer to some hiring opportunities with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and bringing junior staff on board.
Wow, that's you certainly accomplished a lot there. And I say that, I started EMI here and built it up, and we're building it up, and I'm going through some of what you went through. And I know that, just to dig a little, well, first of all, before I go further, let me just say this for a lot of you out there, because Mike said this well, but I just want to reinforce it, that there are really great things about working for very large national profile engineering organizations, right? And there are also really great things for kind of working for smaller engineering organizations, right? I think there are kind of benefits and, good and bad of both, right? I think that happens with a lot of things in life. And I think that some of the things that Mike mentioned about having that touch, being able to give that personal touch, I think is really important. And I say this because we get questions all the time, Mike, from engineers that are thinking about going out on their own, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just want to drive home to them that, like, listen, if you go on your own, in the beginning, there could be rough patches, right? I mean, that happens in any business, but there's certainly a lot of upside for you if you can push through that. But if you're someone out there saying, hey, I'd rather stay at the large company, there'll probably be great opportunities for you there. It's kind of like a personal choice. You have to think about what you want to do. And I think Mike and I can probably both tell you there's a lot of maybe sacrifices you have to make when you're starting out and building your company and growing it, and a lot of time that's invested in it, but it can also be a very rewarding experience because you're kind of taking something. I like to tell people, I started with a laptop, and now I got a group of people, and we're doing some really cool things. So that's something to just keep in mind, number one. The second thing that I want to ask you about, Mike, is that you're an engineer just like me. We're trained in technical skills and engineering and water resources, environmental, et cetera. We're not trained in building a business. And when you have a business where it's you in your guest room slamming out specs and AutoCAD, that's one thing. You're really still doing engineering. But now when you're talking about offices and recruiting and adding a practice leader, you're getting into very high level business strategy. So take us through how an engineer like yourself navigates that, and learns those types of things.
Yeah. So in a lot of it, I have to give a lot of credit to my previous experience with working with large to medium sized firms. And a lot of what I learned was I learned how to recruit. I learned how to market. I learned the business side really through them, and had great experiences there. The other thing is I built a great network of relationships, having worked at a big firm. And so for me, it had been a great experience. I don't look back on it at all and think, well, I shouldn't have gone or whatever, because even with how it ended with the layoff and everything, it really set me up for future success. The interesting thing for me was it's way different being in a well-oiled machine with all these resources. You kind of know what everybody's job is. So I knew what the accountant does and the finance director. But when you're starting out, it's what do you need? And learning, you go through stages. So like I started with a particular bookkeeper when I was 1 to 15 people, and that bookkeeper wound up retiring, and we were hitting the point where we needed to kind of step up anyway and get somebody who could support us getting to the next level. So that's just one example. It's the learning what the outside services could do for me and what I needed, learning about the tax credit studies, and recently the ERC. A lot of that was through the networking and having colleagues at different consulting firms who had been more in the finance side or more in the marketing side, and being able to call and pick their brains. So that personal network really helped me a lot. They were resources I could use to get advice and kind of get input from peers. But a lot of it was, you'd make mistakes, right? And so you'd find out, well, there was learning how to deal with prevailing wage and learning how to deal with hourly employees versus salary. And, there might be a bump or a mistake on a paycheck, and it would come, and you learn from that experience. So there were a lot of small things like that kind of all added together and helped me build experience in the business. And for us, one of the challenges was we've grown on average 30% a year since the company started, right? Wow. And so that's easy the first couple of years, right? Because it's 1 to 3 people or right. 1 to 5 people. But once you start to get up to where our head count's over 65 now, and but that's including part-time folks, interns, et cetera. Sure. But at each stage, you find you've kind of you're stepping up the level of support you need from the outside, and then you're trying to feel your way into what you need to bring in-house.
Right.
So we have outside IT support, and we had outside accounting and bookkeeping. We brought all that in-house this year, the accounting and bookkeeping. Started doing a little bit of our own IT, at least managing it more aggressively this year, focusing on company standards. And some of that was driven by necessity, because you would hit a point where we brought on, a lot of new staff, and you didn't want your plans to all look different. Well, that's when you need the CAD standards. And so it's like, we some of it we learned because I could reach out and ask the network and get good advice. Some of it was through just hitting points where you recognize there's a real need for this and we need to add it. And how do we do that?
Yeah. Yeah. You made me think of that that book, what got you here won't get you there, right? When you
Yeah.
start to go from 1 to 3 people, it's different than when you start to go from 40 to 60 or whatever the case may be. There's different needs for a business and for the people who are within that business, which is something that you kind of have to roll with. So one more question, kind of on the business side of things, is for you personally at this point, do you still do any technical work? What does that look like, your day-to-day stuff?
Yeah, I do. So I stay about, I usually, 12 to anywhere from 10 to 15 hours a week, say. Target long-term is about 12 hours a week doing technical work with clients. A lot of times I'm in a project director role where I'm providing technical input or reviewing things, managing some development of some studies. And so it depends. My technical backgrounds, I've done a lot of water treatment. And when I say water treatment, the water treatment field really includes what was historically wastewater, and now it's all water. And so I've done a lot of work with wastewater, water reuse, drinking water. Really enjoy those projects and am excited about them. I also have a number of clients that I've worked with for 20 years now, 15 to 20 years. Some of them are very small. Some of them are very large. And so I like to still be the point person for some of those, through some of those personal relationships, because it's people who are friends and colleagues that I had now for 15 years to 20 years.
Sure. So you mentioned your project work. So let's talk a little bit about projects for a minute. You, I'm sure, work on some pretty interesting and impactful water resources projects, being in the location that you're in. Can you maybe talk about a project or two that MKN has worked on that you would say was a high profile or a big impactful project in the area?
Sure. So, sir, there are several that we've been really proud to participate in. One is we're have been doing a lot of work in kind of the progressive design build space. And so we're currently in the design of a major wastewater treatment plant improvement for Cambria Community Services District here in San Luis Obispo County. So we're upgrading their wastewater plant, and we've done process modeling and all kinds of really fun, cool stuff to upgrade that plant as part of a progressive design build. And so we're a sub-consultant to one of the major utility companies who can come in and offer these services in California to utility agencies. And they'll come in and the focus is energy efficiency and energy recovery. But you can use those opportunities to have some pretty major treatment plant upgrades in this case, and address a lot of long-term problems, get some funding from the utility, and reduce your power usage overall. And so we've worked through this it's called the Sustainable Solutions Turnkey Program. We've done projects with eight different agencies over the last 12 years, and some of them have been pretty major treatment plant upgrades. We worked on the water treatment plant for the city of San Luis Obispo, upgraded their ozonation system at the plant, and get to work on some really cool, innovative projects that way. Also doing quite a bit with PFAS. So we're the PFAS program manager. For those of you that are familiar with it, PFAs. I won't try to pronounce that, but we've been working with the Water Replenishment District of Southern California, one of the largest utility districts in the state, to manage their PFAS program. And so we're over the development of PFAS removal systems in a number of different communities within their service area. And we also are designing 2 PFAS removal systems right now for Atascadero Mutual Water Company. And so those have been really innovative, exciting projects for us.
That's great. So can you talk a little bit about like some of the challenges and opportunities that might arise when you're working on projects in Central and Southern California, considering the region's kind of unique environmental and regulatory considerations?
Sure. So the interesting thing for me about California, having grown up on the East Coast, in smaller states, California is a very large state, and each county is almost like its own state. So each area kind of has its own political trends. It has its own different levels of kind of environmental review in some cases, depending on what local agencies engaged, depending on the level of engagement of the public. You might go to public meetings like city council meetings or utility district meetings where no one shows up other than your board members or your council, and you might go to some that are standing room only with people lined up out the door. And so that's always interesting for me, the navigating the different agency needs is really one of the things that drove the development of our business, because the agencies in the Central Valley, some may have a different set of priorities than the ones, say, in Southern California or even the coastal agencies. Coastal agencies can face concerns with sea level rise. They face concerns with water reuse and water supply, and whereas in the Central Valley, you have a combination of needs. You have the need for reliable water supply for food production. You have concerns with delivering water to the agencies. You have concerns with the kind of constant interaction and partnership between local agencies and food suppliers that all need to use the same water supply. And then when you get to Southern California, you have in some areas just a very dense population that continues to grow, and the need to look at water reuse and look at ways to capture stormwater. And so that's been the exciting thing for me, is the network of local offices to me was really important from day one. And once we realized we had a legitimate business, it was, we don't want to have PO boxes and mailboxes, et cetera, type. That's not a slam on mailboxes, et cetera, but we didn't want that kind of a network. We needed real staff, real technical expertise within a couple of hours of each of these clients. And a lot of it is because they need to understand the local needs of those agencies and kind of the local flavor. And you can't apply one size fits all to solutions in communities in California.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that what I'm really hearing from you throughout this conversation is one of the most important aspects of, I think, building an engineering firm is relationships.
Right.
Right. I mean, it sounds like from your experience working for the larger company to you getting out there on your own, some of these clients you work with for 15 years, you're hiring, you're recruiting people. It really seems like it's probably one of the key drivers for success is being able to interact with people and build the right relationships.
Absolutely. I think with that in mind, 99% of my day as a CEO, whether it's on the technical work or just the business and administration side, really is relationship management. I would say it's you always have, when you have a lot of very very talented, very ambitious staff, there's always a potential that the priorities can be different for each person, and you're constantly managing that as the manager and owner in a company. And it's always, you always face the continual pressures in the consulting business of marketing to win work, of delivering the work you have, of getting staff trained. And the biggest exercise there is relationship management and communication, is making sure everyone on the team understands that a lot of the pressures that we face, particularly as a rapidly growing firm, has been because of the growth, and everybody needs to be communicated to, and everyone needs to understand that that's important to us. Is we want to grow and we want to continue to offer, and the reason we do that is not necessarily greed. It's to offer great opportunities to people, and it's to bring in some of the most talented folks out there in the engineering market today. And so it's a lot of my job is relationship management, communication, and I've found that developing those skills has been more important for me in a lot of ways than even my technical capabilities.
Sure thing. So that being said, like as the CEO, Kind of like I would say people look at you for kind of like a heartbeat, in the company and what's going on. And when things happen in the world, like a COVID or in the economy, if there's a downturn, I would imagine that, most people in the company are going to look at your reaction to those things to kind of get a feel for, how stable their jobs are, what's going on with the company. And so how do you kind of maintain, kind of an even keel approach and not like overreact or underreact when things like that happen? How do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think the COVID example that you mentioned is a really good one. And in that case, we as a company, a couple months before the COVID pandemic hit and there were the restrictions in California, we had moved the whole company over to Microsoft Teams, and in order to better communicate among ourselves at the offices, and we also made sure everyone had VPN access because we started to find as we were growing, more people were working from home. So the realities of how people needed to work to take care of families and balance their personal and home lives drove that move. We did not realize how vital that was going to be and how much calmer we were than a lot of our competitors, both on the larger and smaller side, because we already had these systems in place. And the Friday before, Governor Newsom had kind of issued the executive order that we were going to ask folks that were not critical workers to work from home. That Friday before that edict was issued, we told all our staff, we understand the COVID epidemics here. We want everybody to work from home for the next 2 weeks. And so we did it in advance of that, which not a lot of firms could say because we were concerned about people getting sick. And we had a conference call, myself and the operations managers kind of talked to them about it and said, hey, here's what I'd like to do. Are you all supportive of this? They said, yeah, we think this makes sense right now. Let's do this for 2 weeks and kind of see where we land. Well, we got ahead of it. And I think the message to me coming out of that was when you see those trends, and at the time it might have seemed a little bit extremist to do that because a lot of our competitors weren't doing that. But I actually received a lot of positive feedback from the staff about a week or two later when we had gotten ahead of it. There was no panic from our firm. There was no, oh my, we can't come into work tomorrow.
Right.
It was all right. Everybody was ready. Everybody worked from home. We bought some home equipment for folks and made sure they had the right setup. And other than that, we were able to keep producing and they were able to take care of their families, et cetera. So I think the thing that came to me out of that was, as a leader, my goal is look ahead.
Sure.
And see where I think things are going and be willing to take the leap or take the chance if I really feel like it's the right way to go.
You got to be very forward thinking.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, I like that a lot. And I think it is critical in the world we live in. There's lots of change that's always going on right now. So
Definitely.
That's a good one. All right. So just a few more questions. The first one, I want to talk a little bit about company culture, right? Culture is really critical in growing a firm. And you talked about a lot of stuff that happened from going from one office to then more offices and more people and more support staff. So what are your thoughts on company culture and how do you focus on it at MKN?
I think one of the advantages to being a small firm is you can experiment and it's not super costly. So for example, we have an employee engagement committee that we started several years ago, and the engineer that runs that has really came to us and said, hey, I've got a passion for this. I did this at my old company and I'd like to see you do that here. And I said, awesome, go for it. And so she pulled together a group of, different staff from across different offices. We mix it up every year, but they come up with great ideas. They're kind of an incubator for us. And they did things like they came up with an AI competition a few months ago where they said, all right, if you come compete and come up with your best AI opportunity, we're going to do a lunchtime session. You could present it. Has to be related to work, and you can position to get an Amazon gift card for the winners, right? And they were also good. We gave several folks gift cards, so it was really cool. So we can do things like that. We have we do an annual match program, so for charity. And
Okay.
the first years you do something like that, you're like, what if they come in with 100 charities, right? What if you got to match $5,000 and you're a 20-person firm? So you take a risk on some of that. When you're small, you can do it. And so that's the thing I've really enjoyed doing, is hearing kind of the ideas that come out of that group. And then the other thing too is I really think it's important for me to try to be accessible to all the staff. And I really encourage them. We do a quarterly town hall. We present financials. We talk about concerns in the marketplace and kind of what we're seeing. We celebrate some of the victories and some of the great things we have going on. And then we also communicate to the staff where we were going and what we're doing. I encourage staff to contact me after each one of those. I try to make regular visits to the offices and meet folks. And then also, for me, the technical work that I do as an engineer and slash CEO, I really try to work with junior staff on those, because it gives me a chance to work with junior staff in each office. And I've found that it's been really rewarding. And it's been an opportunity for me to kind of help encourage the company culture and enforce, the importance of excellence in your products and mastering your technical skills and meeting some of those objectives that we have as a company through that daily work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important, right? Like engaging with team members and, and like you said, it's everything gets a little bit harder as a company grows when you're talking about interacting with people and getting to offices. But I think the more you can do it as the company's smaller, it just builds that culture. And then, maybe it's going to be a couple other people that are going to start taking it over in different regions. But that's the thing that I think is nice about a small business, is that we have companies that come to us that are maybe 400 or 500 people, and they're looking to like make sure they have more consistency in their project management and doing different stuff. And it becomes really difficult at that point, because you got so many people that are doing so many different things that to kind of pull it all together, it becomes challenging. But when you have a smaller company, you kind of, it's just less to have to undo, if you will. Right. Yep. And it makes it a little bit easier in a lot of ways, whether it's the culture building or your PM efforts or your technical work or whatever the case may be. All right. So last question I got for you, Mike. As a CEO, you have over a couple of decades here of experience in the field. You've built this company. What advice would you give to aspiring engineers that are looking to make a difference in the world of water resource management and civil engineering?
So that's a really good question. So one of the things I've always encouraged my staff is, don't rely on the projects to get you all the experience and knowledge that you need. That's part of it. And engineering is an apprenticeship. As you grow from an assistant engineer to a professional engineer, that time period and then the continued mentoring after that are really important. It's an apprenticeship, the on-the-job training. But if you have a particular passion, it's important to pursue those things on your own. So when I was a junior engineer, I grabbed every journal that came into the office. I grabbed every magazine. I take them home and flip through them at night for a half hour. And my goal was just to learn everything I could in the areas I was passionate about. And you in our field in consulting as a whole is a very entrepreneurial field. I continually tell my staff there are no experts. You are the expert. Because what I've found in a lot of my work in the past and where I've been with other companies, the folks that became experts in the field are the folks that were passionate about it. Mm. And a lot of times they weren't necessarily the strongest technically, but they could communicate it and they could work with a client on it. And that client viewed them as the expert, even if sometimes they weren't. And sometimes they had to go back and get support from technical folks back in the office. But I think that it's that passion and that excitement about a particular aspect of your career find something that you really want to do. Find something that you really love. There's a piece to every engineering project that you may not want to do, but you get through those too. Right. And you learn from those experiences. Sometimes those are the most, sometimes those give you the most growth. But the meantime, when you've got that project you don't want, be at home at night reading up on the ones you do want. be ready for those opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's great. And one thing I would just add to that, going back to what Mike said before, is it could be other ways to kind of live out your passion in your firm. Like, for example, the person that you said is doing the employee engagement committee, right? Like, you'll be passionate about some technical stuff, but you might also be passionate about some other things. And you can go to your leadership in your organization, say, hey, I'm really interested in this. I'm really interested in researching AI. Can I maybe lead up a committee or an initiative on that? And you'll be surprised. I would say 9 times out of 10, they're going to be like, yeah, we'd love to have someone work on that. Right. So I would say, don't be afraid to ask about opportunities around your passion, even outside of engineering, because you can be multidimensional, and that may also help you to find a little bit more enjoyment in some of the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Well, once again, Mike Nunley. Mike is the CEO, president. He's the founder of ENHANCEMENT. Mike, thanks so much for spending some time with us here on the Civil Engineering CEO. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Anthony. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mike. It's such an exciting thing to talk to someone who started something from nothing and grew it to where Mike has grown MKN to. And we're really appreciative of his time. And we're going to put out a lot more videos like this. So if you like this one, please be sure to subscribe to our channel here, as we do put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. And I'll see you next week.